Hello,
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 hello.
hello.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Turn down. You guys are feeding back. So you need to turn yourselves down. Or if you hit, there should be a setting. Let's see. Is that better? Oh, wait, now we're better. Is anybody feeding back anymore? Good. We're not feeding back. Awesome. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Turn off the overlay so we can get rid of that. So that was All In, guys. We just finished All In. Oh no, we are feeding back. I think it's Steve. I think Steve, you're feeding back.
What do I got to do?
Go into settings, and there's an option that's like echo cancellation.
Now it says it's already on, Josh.
It's a
But I do
it's
have
a
advanced. I have echo cancellation and noise suppression on.
it shouldn't be feeding back then. That's weird. I do talk really loud. I like that I beat the echo cancellation. Well, now it's okay. Now it's not doing it. So who knows? Who knows why it's doing it? Who knows what reason things are in this world? All right, we can just go. We'll be fine. So yeah, that was All In. Welcome those of us who are joining us. My name is Joshua Hale Fialkov. This is Wrestling with Story. We talk about how wrestling functions from a story standpoint rather than just fanboying out. That being said, I invited a few of my friends over to fanboy out for a little bit.
Yeah, I have no idea why I'm here.
Yeah,
Regarding the story part, I have no clue. So I
I,
appreciate the love.
well, why don't you guys? Do you guys want to one by one? Do you want to introduce yourselves? Going around the screen, I got Michael's to my left. I think I don't know how to. I don't know directions. I have to do this to do directions. He's to my right. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Mike Kingston. I'm writer and creator at Headlock Comics. I make comics about wrestling. I make comics with wrestlers, and just watch a lot of wrestling.
Clutch, you want to go?
Yeah, I'm Sean, aka Big Clutch, longtime wrestling fan, comics industry executive for the past like decade plus, and just now I'm just a schlub who just watches AEW nonstop.
And Mr. Orlando.
Steve Orlando. I writer of many comics for Marvel and DC right now. The Scarlet Witch and Avengers Assemble. And we're on this pod with the person responsible for making me a wrestling fan, Mike Kingston. So it does feel like a full circle moment. He's both responsible in the positive and negative ways for making me a wrestling fan.
So let's start. I mean, I guess let's do overall. What did you guys think of the show overall? Um, I
Terrible.
I terrible. Was that terrible? It seems
Kidding, I'm kidding.
impossible.
One
That
of the
was
best episodes in a long time.
yeah. I thought it was really really good. When I was live streaming, when I do the AEW pay per views, um, because I do so like when I do AEW pay per views and I do the WWE pay per views, and the thing I'm always left with is like Goldilocks syndrome, right? Which is that the WWE ones are like way too short and have way too many commercials, and the AEW ones are way too long, and I need a break. This is the first one, first pay per view in a long time where I was like, oh, that was perfect. Like it actually felt like the perfect length. Like there weren't matches that dragged for me. There wasn't anything that felt out of place. It really felt
Did you
like a
watch the pre-show too, or just the card? Main
I
card?
watched I didn't live stream the pre-show cuz that would have been too much, but I watched the pre-show while I was like getting up and getting dressed this morning. Um so like I did the entire whatever that is 6 hours, which is mind-blowing now that I say it out loud cuz what a day. What about for you guys?
Yeah, I made breakfast tacos with the wife and sat down and started watching. So had the dog next to me on the couch, which was really cool. He did not like the fireworks, but he hung out, and yeah, it was awesome.
I had it on while I was working on a script.
Did you do you also did the pre-show, Michael?
Yeah, I had it on the whole time.
I had to. I mean, the pre-show was where we had Willow Nightingale, so I had to put it on. So I've been here, but Kinger and I are also East Coast, so it only started at 11 a.m. You know, like I mean, it's child's play.
Yeah, the starting at 8 a.m. For us is very strange. Like it's a real mystery why it feels like.
But it
feels
did feel like a
slight
football
punishment.
Sunday because you get up early on Sundays for us, and it's like, cool, man. We have Scramby is going to watch the Steelers, and you just go, and then never past midnight.
That does make
Yeah,
sense,
I
though.
feel like there's some
Football.
karma involved because all of the, you know, like when I don't have time to watch a lot of the weekly shows. I think I told Josh when I was on the podcast, so I usually listen to the What Culture guys sort of summarizing them. You know, they're constantly having the reverse situation where they have to stay up till 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning to watch a normal American show. So I feel like there is a little bit of karma to the UK shows when it comes around once or twice a year. But yeah, I mean, I don't watch much sports besides wrestling and UFC. You know, having a daytime thing on Sunday is relatively unique for me. So it was nice. You know, I got to have mimosa instead of red wine with it. So, you know, it all felt very nice. I like some moments of the show. You know, I don't want to piss in anybody's oatmeal here. So I will say that I certainly had some issues, but I did think the high points were really high, is what I would say.
Well, let's start with high points. For me,
we can not even leave high points if you want. That's fine.
No, we can. I don't mind. I don't mind. There was a couple things. There was a couple weird booking things. I think that I'm a little curious about. Like narratively, it seemed weird, but I think probably the real highlight was the Danielson Swerve match for me. Like I think they for something that had sort of like impossibly high expectations around it. I think it like more than lived up to it. Like the moment when he's when he's getting kicked and he reaches out to his family. It's like this is just beautiful. What a beautiful, ridiculous wrestling moment. That is like all the it's all the good stuff and all the ridiculous stuff simultaneously. But like the ending was great. I like when Hangman came out, I had that moment of like, no, don't do it, Tony. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it by having Hangman screw up the match. And then they didn't let Hangman screw up the match. You know, like they let the story in just enough so that we can have that story stuff that's going to move us forward. But like at the same time, we don't actually have to suffer. We don't have to have the match suffer for having the story interrupted, right? Like we get to have Brian have his clean, meaningful win. So that for me was definitely the highlight of the night, I think.
I had a sort of fantasy booking scenario in my head where Paige wins the Casino Battle Royal, and then he costs Swerve the match. Danielson wins. Nigel comes out and destroys Danielson, and then Paige ends up as champion, which I feel like would have furthered everybody's stories. But like, I'm incredibly stoked to see Nigel McGuinness back because big 2000, early 2000 Ring of Honor or late 2000 Ring of Honor mark. So.
I mean, do you think he's going to actually keep wrestling, or do you think this was a one-off?
No, he got to wrestle.
Yeah, Kingston set me up to be negative here, but I have to say no. One of my major negatives is wasting nearly 100% of the returns on this show. I would like to believe that he's going to stick around, but based on how things have gone for the past, 5 years, I would love that I would love for him to come back. But I don't know how. I know Mike thinks it's going to continue, but I honestly like my only big negatives for the show, so we can get on to the positives, are that I feel like a lot of the returns were actually, I feel like 100% of the returns were blown and debuts were blown, but also they didn't need to happen. So like I actually think I like nearly all of the results, but I did like, we hit Nigel immediately, so unfortunately I have to get into it. Like I don't know how you wait years to have him debut, and then he doesn't even, again, it's not like things don't, it is preordained, right? So I don't know how you put him in that match and then don't have him win if that's your one shot. And, if it was shoot sports, okay, but it's not. So just don't put him in the match. So I hope he's back. I know Kinger thinks he's going to come back, but we'll see. I mean, that felt like a misfire to me. But it's funny, as I say that, I'm actually not prepared to be like the downer of this thing, because other than the fact that all these debuts sort of fell flat for me, I liked a lot of the results. I just don't know why you do them. You know, like if you can hold them, especially Jamie. Like I'll admit, like I don't necessarily go crazy for her the way that a lot of people do, but I don't know how you wait 18 months and then she returns on the pre-show.
I had a big
that
problem. I had a
seems-
big problem with that. That was probably the biggest black mark on the show to me.
And I should say it's not even a negative. I just think that so because I don't want to seem like that, but I would say like I just feel like you could have gotten more out of almost every single one of them. It's not like any of them were even bad, but I feel like you could have gotten a lot more out of all of those.
With Jamie, I don't understand why they didn't just have a match, right? Like she should have just walked in and at least given her a match with Saraya. Like
I mean, they could have done a Saraya Open challenge. Then Saraya,
Yeah.
who's a hometown star, is on the card, and then people kind of know it might be Jamie, and then they buy the show because they want to see it, and then Jamie comes out, she gets a big pop. Like that seems very elementary that they couldn't find 10 minutes on that show for that to happen.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
especially
it would be
because what was the 10 minutes afterwards was sort of nothing, right? Like the 10 minutes before the show was ring entries for the
That's wild.
first match, right? And
they
it's like,
did go all out with every ring entrance tonight, and also the ramp being 50 yards or 100 or however long it was. I was like, oh my gosh, guys! Like it's taking so long for them to get down to the stage, and like that long ramps always bug me because it just kills like any sort of momentum or urgency.
Especially when there's a corner on them. Like when they come out and then there's a corner to the ring. Like, yeah, it's definitely a pet peeve of mine.
I think that was that feels like WWE envy, right? Where they're like, the WWE has a giant long ramp. Why can't we have a really giant long ramp? Because
I mean, at least no one like ran in for a save and like stopped to do their taunt. Like not to bring it up, not to make this about Jeff Hardy, but I always remember when his like brother was in so much trouble that he had to run in and save him, but not so much trouble that he couldn't stop to do the, you know, the Hardy dance. Like Matt is in pain, but not that much pain. So let me just like do a little bit of headbanging. But I will bring it around to say, like, despite that Nigel thing, I also really like the clean finish on Danielson. Like, I'm not here to poop in everybody's dinner. Like, and I thought the moment with his family was very nice and all those things. You will never hear me complain about that. And I think that, you know, I think Swerve will be fine. Kingston knows, like, Prince Nana is maybe the unsung hero of AEW for me. I think that he's a value-added player. So
I gotta say the moment in the pre-show where they showed him signing the contract, which was like a super awkward. It's just one of those weird Tony Khan bits, right? Where it's like Tony Khan acting terribly, but Prince Nana looking over the contract while holding his coffee cup and going, sign on the dotted line. Highlighted the night for me. Just delightful. Just like a delightful moment.
That coffee cup is more over than some people on the roster. You know, I mean,
absolutely true.
Sorry, Anthony Agogo.
Yeah, poor Anthony Agogo. What about for you, Clutch? What was your highlight, Clutch?
Oh man, I mean, it just the shirt says it all, man. Just Jack Perry coming out, and I think honestly, like, I know I'm like Brian top, but the Jack Perry stuff, I think having this kind of come around for the year, and I've really enjoyed like him just kind of like F it. You know what? I'm gonna just jump into this. They've done really well with the rebranding. I still don't understand him in the Elite. It seems like a little bit of a mixed match, but I really enjoy that match. And Darby is honestly one of my top 5, and that was a pretty great match. I wish there was some fire, but you know what are you gonna do?
I mean, Darby does always impress me. I texted Kinger, like, I also really like Darby. I mean, Sting is what got me back into wrestling, as I said on Josh's pod when he came back in 2015 when he came to WWE. So I'm not going to say that I wasn't super excited that he came in to save his son. But I will. I got to give Darby credit too. You know, he always finds new ways to put thumbtacks on something, and I know that I'm being absurd, like it's like, but like, you know, I think was it last year that he had the hoodie that was covered in thumbtacks for the match with Swerve and Christian, and I'm kind of like, and he's had like the faceplate with them glued on when he broke his nose or whatever, or broke his orbital bone. But I like glued them to his face. I'll give it to him. I didn't expect it. Right? It's like we're approaching like 7 levels of attaching like weapons to his body. But I applaud his creativity. I did not expect those to be taped. I mean, the time is going to come when he comes out with like Wolverine claws or something within our lifetime.
Yeah, my grievance is actually the same as also the elite stuff. Like, it feels weird. So I understand having Sting come back because you want Sting to come back. But so like we've set up that Jack Perry's part of the elite. We set up that Darby's part of Team AEW. Why wouldn't Team AEW come out and save him? Like, I understand that like the last thing we did with that was that Team AEW and Darby are like sort of at odds, like they don't quite like each other. But like that kicks off a better story for me, right?
My
'Cause
larger
you can't do anything with Sting. You
my
know?
larger issue with AEW, just in general, like my biggest issue with them is how they handle like extended beatdowns, and then no one ever comes to save anybody. I'm like, everybody, all the baby faces look like such dicks because like guys are just getting destroyed out there for 20 minutes and nobody comes and saves them. Like they let John Moxley when they did that exploding thing, and obviously it went weird, but like, I mean, he you know, he almost died out there, you know, and then nobody came to save him. Or when Hobbs beat down Omega for like a decade, and like earlier in the show, Edge like introduced himself and he was still in there. He was still in the locker room. Like he should have come and saved him. Like, hey, I don't want to be part of that. So
yeah, it's a weird thing that feels like I don't know what logic there is, and it ends up being like the thing that always distracts me the most on these shows, because even like it's a weird complaint, I guess, but like in the pre-show, that like 16-man opening match was nonsensical. Like who was on what team, why was just like
they got all the British guys out there that they didn't put on the main roster.
But put them all together,
or put them on the card.
Like, like put them like have some.
Well, no, I mean, like the British booking it all in actually puts like the LWO to shame, where they're like, "Are you British? You're on the same team." It all makes perfect sense.
Yeah. But like,
I mean,
Private Party are the hosts of the show, so they're on the heel team. Also, they're not really the hosts of the show because they only talked once and then never again. And to be fair, when they did talk, it wasn't great. So like, you know, that makes sense. Like maybe don't do it again.
I'd love to see like the T&E budget for the show, like how much money they just spend on bringing every single wrestler, 200 people from the roster over to London for the week. It's insane.
Well, then they brought Rosa over to do Spanish commentary, and they didn't give her a match. I mean, she's there, right? Her and Deanna are probably the two. Maybe Anna Jay. There's a handful of people who didn't. I mean, mostly women that didn't get to wrestle, which is a little whatever. But I mean, yeah, I couldn't even imagine what the flight budget is.
I mean, I will say, you're talking about high points. I really enjoyed the gauntlet match. I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't almost throw my phone through the TV when Christian won. But up until then, I really loved it. And I was, that's not even an anti-Christian thing. I actually think, I mean, again, all of this is news to Sean and Josh, but every single wrestling opinion I have is immediately sent to Mike at all hours of the day. Again, this is his fault though, so it feels like karma. I actually love Christian and I love Jeff Jarrett, and we talked about this on your pod, Josh. Like these are guys, especially Jarrett. Like before I took a break for like 15 years. I was over Jeff Jarrett. I hated him in WCW. I hated him in WWE. We're talking late 90s at this point. But now the fact that he's still in shape and can still work, nobody works like Jeff Jarrett anymore, and so it's really, really fresh to me. And I feel the same about Christian. I think that he's one of their best heels. I think that he has lasted to a point where what he does is really unique. But he's just gotten so many shots, to be frank. I mean, it seems like if there's a belt, Christian has challenged for it. So, and I think it's past time to pull the trigger on Lucha turning on him. I mean, clearly the crowd wanted it. Like
it is like my biggest pet peeve about AEW is that they won't do the goddamn Luchasaurus story. Like it sounds. Again, I think it's ridiculous, but like when I went to Dynamite whenever it was in LA, so like 2 months ago, whenever that was, and like I was the one guy shouting Luchasaurus, doing the Luchasaurus chants. Because I was just like like, what's going on? Like, why are we not doing Luchasaurus? Like, it's the best setup story of all the long-term booking that AEW has ever done.
I mean, having
Luchasaurus
done
Kill Switch story is like the best one, and they keep not doing it. And
I mean,
it's so easy.
having done those AEW comics, I could see a world where they're holding the trigger on him because, and I know this will sound obvious to people on this podcast, but he's not a dinosaur. And yes, thank you. But like having gone through the story process, and knowing what hits and what doesn't, I can see that being an issue for some of the decision makers, and obviously like that's ludicrous, of course, like it's pro wrestling, but I could see there being a perceived ceiling for someone who has a quote unquote unrealistic character, which, it's wrestling. I actually don't think that matters. I mean, Undertaker was not actually a zombie.
Hold on a second. Back up.
But again, obvious. But joking aside, I think,
one word about Santa Claus and I'm quitting. I'm out.
But his peak era, I would argue, is when they just sort of accepted that obviously wasn't even trying to be the dead man anyway. Like the Phenom era, he was just like happened to be a really tough dude who also was into spooky shit.
Yeah.
And you just kind of were okay with that. So like, what is stopping Lucha from being a really tough 7-foot tall dude that happens to like to dress like a dinosaur? It doesn't matter. He can still kill you.
That being said, though, like look how over Hologram is, and Hologram is equally a ridiculous, like what a absolutely absurd, stupid character.
So
totally works.
Is Hologram really over?
So
I think he is. Like that crowd in at least in Texas, he is. I don't know about the rest of the world.
One of my other big problem that I have with AEW is they don't book big guys well. They just use big guys for setup stuff and then they disappear. Lance Archer, whatever, like that's always been sort of my problem. I feel like they've got some really good big guys and they generally don't give them any kind of a run, right? You put them on for a couple weeks, they win a couple squashes, you feed them to the babyface and then they go away for a while or they sit in the background for a while. So
I mean, they did Satnam right today, right? They showed him as a true monster that he really is. Poor Leo Rush, rest in peace.
But I mean, think about how long he's been on the roster, and I mean, he's just I don't know. I feel like they could do so much more with him. So,
I mean, I feel that way about Big Bill. I think that, the name is goofy, but whatever. If any of you know why he's so over in the UK, I would be interested to know. I didn't watch Collision last night, but as I was looking at the results, apparently people were like booing both for beating him.
It was surreal last night.
I feel like it's a Baron Corbin in France type thing where he just
it's like the Montreal effect where it's like they're just odd and they're gonna cheer the wrong guy or I guess the right guy in this case.
But they weren't just cheering Big Bill. They were like hateful of Hook. And Hook was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, Hook didn't know what to do. He literally didn't know how to do his moves.
It with him a little bit too, though. There might be a backlash there just because, he beat 3 guys with one eye and whatever. Yeah. Like, that's a lot for...
Well, listen, Rey Mysterio has been wrestling with one eye for like 5 years. How can you
even... So the other matches that really stuck out to me, MJF and Ospreay, it's hard to live up to that hour long. But this one was pretty damn good. It was really like the storytelling was fantastic. I think, the fact that it wasn't Max cheating the whole time. So like Max was just really he really wrestled his heart out. It really felt like an honest wrestling match between the two of them. It just, and they both, feeling them both be so over with the crowd and feeling like in a way it was like the perfect harmony between storytelling and wrestling for me, right? Like the storytelling that's led up to this match was so strong. And even though the Tiger Driver stuff has been so on the nose and so blatant, when you finally got to that moment, it felt so earned and it felt like a really big, meaningful moment. And also the fact that there wasn't the run-in that they had, right? That it wasn't a bunch of run-ins, that Kyle Fletcher didn't run in, that we didn't get somebody new, that it was only Daniel Garcia, and that Daniel Garcia didn't so much interrupt the match as sort of like preserve the match. All that stuff felt like, oh, they're actually paying stuff off. Like it felt like the whole match was such a nice, neat little bow. Even down to Christopher Daniel coming out with the right belt, right, to replace the belt at the end.
One moment I thought was funny was when MJF used the Crossroads, and I think he thought he was going to get heat out of it in the way that people used to use the pedigree, and he didn't. You know what I mean? People just took it as a move, which I thought was funny. But
I mean, I think that was my favorite match, and having just shot on all of the returns, I think Garcia was the one that worked the best. You know, like, and I'll be honest, like, for whatever reason, normally I'm not a complete idiot, but I was like, who could that be? Like, I don't know why I forgot that he had been murdered by Max. But I was like, it's Moxley, but he stopped lifting. And no, but I mean, I'm hyped for that. I'll be honest. Like, I mean, I'm from upstate New York, so there's no feud that I could get more excited about than, I mean, Garcia will be a mega face for me if when he works with Max, like all time. I mean, half my family's from Long Island as well, but that doesn't matter. Like, I mean, Garcia being from Buffalo, that's my ultimate feud for the rest of the year now. So I'm very into it.
Like buffalo sauce and
come on, Mike. But like, and I also just really like him. Actually, my fiance hates Daniel Garcia, which we fight about sometimes. But I like somehow he is both to me like one of the ultimate Gen Z wrestlers, but also looks like he's from 1920. Like he could be like a pugilist from the John L. Sullivan era.
If he had the hat, if he had the right hat on, yeah.
It's the posture and everything, and his taunt just being like the fighting Irish symbol, for lack of a better phrase. Like, I really like him. So I think of all the returns, and as you said, like he came back, he made his point, but he didn't decide the match, which I thought was great.
Yeah, it'll be nice Garcia can get like a little bit edge back. Look, coming out of the Jericho Appreciation Society and the stuff with him with Daddy Magic and other dude Parker, he just kind of felt like just lost a little bit, and I think if he can kind of come back after this with a little bit of an edge, and honestly, like I'm excited for the feud with MJF and Ospreay to be done, so for MJF can get rid of this American whatever whole gimmick that he's got right now. Like, I think his return has been completely botched, and it'll be interesting to see if we can just kind of take it to the next step with him.
I think it was tough because of the Cole situation, right? Like everybody wants him to come back, and then obviously the people that sent him away were not really sort of a threat anymore. So it's a tough situation, I think, from a booking standpoint. And then they obviously want him to be healed for Wembley, but
Kingston and I disappeared on his return, or disagreed on his return. I will come clean. I like Adam Cole has X-Pac heat for me, so that is certainly a factor. But I mean, if Cole can't wrestle yet, which it appears he can't, I actually thought that at least for the moment, I thought his return was as good as it could be. And now after, I would totally agree. Like they fumbled the ball, but if he can't wrestle Cole, then him just kicking him in the balls and rolling him out of the ring like trash was kind of the best statement he could make if he was just moving on. So for me, that immediate return worked, but I think you're right. Like he's kind of been adrift. The abrupt heel turn, though we know why, was a little weird. So we'll see where he goes from now. I mean, like he's obviously gonna go with Garcia, and I hope Garcia ends up winning the feud. It's possible. I don't know if it's probable, but he did beat Debray. He's the Dragon Slayer, so he could. I mean, he's got things to point to.
Well, see, I feel like the match or the promo off they had this week on Dynamite was what like fixed his comeback for me. Like him having that moment where he broke, where Max was just like, where he finally just said like, I fucking hate that you like him more than you like me, was the like, oh, there you go. That's it. That's why that like, it like snaps all in place, where it's like, no, he's the same guy. Exactly the same guy. Like he hasn't changed at all. Like it's not that he's more of a bastard. It's not that he's changed. it's not that his character has changed. It's that like all of his insecurities have been bundled up into something else and he's acting out again. But I will say I did spend the whole match being like, is Adam Cole gonna come out? Is Adam Cole gonna come out? When's Adam Cole gonna come out? Is Adam Cole gonna come out? Because that'd be great. I want Adam Cole to come out. I just
The
want
only
Adam
problem
Cole.
I had with that match was I don't know. AEW's abuse of the tombstone is crazy. Like a tombstone on the floor. Like I'm not Jim Cornette, but I mean, I don't think people should get up from a tombstone on the floor. And Juice Robinson's dick bump was he was up way too soon after that. Like even just with that being worked, that had to have been a miserable.
Yeah, there's not a lot of protection for big moves. Like there's, I mean, maybe a handful that they have as fully protected, but yeah, it gets rough when you see like that should have killed that guy, and he's like, all right, pull him up, and you're going.
Pops right up.
Sometimes I think they just need like an old guy in the, like Arn Anderson, for lack of a better word, in a rocking chair in the middle of the locker room, be like, hey, can somebody kick out of this? And then just have him give the thumbs up or thumbs down. Be like, no.
That guy is Bubba Ray Dudley, and he's very angry all the time about it. Is the thing. He's just so angry constantly, and
Well, I
he
think
goes on the radio and yells about it so much.
I mean, there's
so
a
much.
kernel of truth to it, right? Because if you keep escalating, at some point, where do you go? Like I like AEW notably more than WWE. At the same time, it is true. If things just keep getting crazier, there is something to protecting moves. I mean, when you, and sometimes it's not even where you look. Like one of the most protected moves in the business is the bro kick, and Sheamus doesn't even always win, but when he hits that, he usually wins, and it still matters. And it doesn't even mean that dude is unbeatable, but I think there is something to that. I mean, but look, long ago, I think I was in a show in Minneapolis and I was talking to Mark Henry, and like, you can get anything over if you take time. Like, you could get a headlock over as a finisher, as long as you make sure nobody else does it. And you put the time in. But I do think it's challenging. I think that it's challenging to still make it feel, depending on the move, it's challenging to make it still feel organic. Like I remember, back when they decided that like it was going to be a big deal that Roman kicked out of the F5, there was that period where like suddenly people were just going down for one F5, even though that had never been the case for many years. And like, it was obvious why they were doing it, but it didn't, it felt forced, to me at least. I mean, Joe going down to one F5, that we could do a whole podcast on Joe going down for one F5.
Same.
But so I think it can be done, but I do think there's an art and a little bit of sleight of hand to making people not realize you're doing it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right.
I just think too, for a company that's had such an astronomical injury rate. I mean, think about all the guys that weren't on this show that are hurt, right? I mean, and some of these guys, some of your top guys are guys that are wrestling there because WWE would not let them wrestle because they were worried about them getting hurt. So I think just to protect your talent, you know what I mean? It would help to establish some boundaries. I mean, it's Top Flight's incredible, but I mean, half of their time has been, through injuries and stuff. And
well, they got the new suits; they're going to be totally fine.
The Edge spot was insane where he broke his leg. I mean, that's something he didn't need to do. Be a no. And so I mean, I just it's tough too because I know so many people personally now. So like when I watch wrestling, in a lot of ways, it's kind of real because I know the people, and then I'm like, I don't want anybody to get hurt, and then you kind of, yeah.
It's funny, the place that I know, where I noticed it tonight, which again, it's like a weird thing, but when the Dustin Rhodes match in the pre-show, when Brian Cage comes out dressed like Wolverine, right? Which is cool. It's his thing. He does it. It's not.
Why are you laughing, Kingston? Why are you laughing?
But then Sammy Guevara comes out.
Thank you.
Dressed like Wolverine.
They're not on the same team.
Nobody was like, guys, it's super weird that you're both dressed like Wolverine. That might be confusing to people.
I think we understand the term variant right now, guys. This is in our vernacular. We can keep using it. They are variants of the same
I wish all
Correct.
8 of them. I wish all 8 of them were dressed as Wolverine. I think that might have been a little less confusing for all of us.
You
But it's
got
that it's
Sammy
that stuff.
Guevara is the variant from the, or rather, Cage is the variant from like the Stacker Tooniverse, where he's just like significantly beefier.
The Stacker Tooniverse. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
But that's the stuff that, like, it's great that you go to AEW to have freedom, but there's some things that are like, there's freedom to do what you want, and then there's like aesthetic and logic that needs to be
So-
protected.
I mean,
right?
folks, I mean, FTR can never wear Bret Hart gear again after how Max dusted them on that. Like, that was actually the high point of the entire show for me.
But that was the other, also during the tag team match, right? Like, they're wearing black and pink.
yeah.
And the Acclaim's wearing their
The
normal gear.
Acclaimed is wearing black and pink, and
Right.
it's like, wait, who am I? It's literally
Well-
like you're watching it, and your brain is like, who's getting? Because you don't see their heads, you just see their colors, and you're like, I physically can't process what's actually happening because their fucking colors are the same.
And this is the trick with freedom, right? Like, if you've ever talked to a wrestler, like, anytime a wrestler's ever told me like they're like, I'm gonna make this pitch, like that pitch always ends with them winning the title, right? Like, these guys, and to a certain extent, right? Like, their name is their currency, right? Like, if you get jobbed out, too much on, you're done for life, right? It's like a truck driver. If somebody makes you commit an infraction, it goes on your license. So I understand that guys want to protect themselves, but sometimes people don't necessarily have the self-awareness, right? And to me, that's the difference between Cody and AEW and Cody and WWE, right? Like, there's somebody there to sort of blunt his worst instincts, and then that makes him the biggest babyface in wrestling now. And everybody's got it. It's this, I mean, I would probably do it too if somebody was like, oh, go ahead, book yourself. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to beat you, beat you all with my finish. And so, like, that's sort of a thing that you see sometimes, I think, where people have freedom, right? Last year's All In had 3 Freddie Mercury tributes, right? You just need one, right? And it should have been Paige because she was the hometown hero, but then the Bucks had Freddie Mercury jackets, and then Jericho was doing like a Freddie Mercury thing. Like, somebody should step back. Like, you need an editor, not an editor that's like in the weeds, but somebody that's just some guardrails to where, like, hey, we can't all do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I always wonder how you get people to agree to your gimmick. I obviously you can have whatever gimmick you want in the indies, but like, I often wonder, like, why do you, and this is no shade to the people I'm going to mention here right now because they have great value, but like, how do you decide to be Cheeseburger versus like, if I could be Cheeseburger or I could be Walter, I would just always be Walter, like my gimmick is I chop you until you're dead. And then I don't sell any of your offense. Like, why? Of course, that's a great gimmick. But like, I'm always fascinated on how you, like, people have to go along with that. There's got to be a discussion behind the scenes. Obviously, Walter's a huge dude and he's fucking great. This is not about him. I just mean, like, why would you pick a gimmick other than I can kill you and never sell your offense? Especially if your gimmick, like Cheese, is like, I just get killed. Like, usually I have to pay to see someone do that to a guy. So
I don't know. Mikey Whipwreck had quite a career of just sucking, right? Like, that was his whole thing.
But that's it, just to be different, right? To stand out. If everybody's a world beater and you're the, I mean, like, Darby is so different, and you know what I mean? But like, historically, guys built like that don't have a career, and he's got a career because he's so different character-wise, and he does things creatively in the ring. That sets him apart from, the 1,000 other 100-pound guys that are at wrestling school. And I think that's the thing. You still got to be able to pull it. You got to be able to look like you can pull it off, right? Like, you can't. Cheeseburger can't be like, oh, I'm Walter. I mean, it'd be a fun comedy gimmick, maybe, but.
That's actually a good place to transition to Mariah May and Tony Storm, I think, right? Because Tony
was my
Storm,
highlight for the show.
Yeah, that was my highlight. I think that's probably, other than Danielson, my other highlight for the show. I think that match, first of all, that storyline, I think, is like, of all the AEW I've ever seen, my favorite thing from top to bottom. Like, I think it's been booked just beautifully. I think it's like the most emotionally engaging story. I think, like, just all of it has been fantastic. And then the match, like, it's funny because my wife doesn't really watch wrestling, but she watches stuff with Max and she watches the Tony Storm stuff. Like that's all she cares about. She doesn't give a shit about anything else. So my wife was like texting me while she's watching Tony Storm while I was live streaming, and like watching my wife's emotional response to it and how like into it and upset she was. And then there's just my watch is just pinging. What the fuck, how could they do that, this is ridiculous, this is outrageous, that can't be the end, this is so. And I'm like, yeah, it's effective, like it super works.
It's the right. So
But yeah, like how did you guys react to not just the finish but sort of the whole thing?
I just thought the finishing sequence was incredible, where she was down and then she just popped up, and like I thought that was great. I just think, like you said, top to bottom, I think it's the best thing that they've done in a long time, if not ever. And it definitely speaks to the collaboration. I think it's interesting that it's been, largely booked with the girls obviously have input, but RJ City, and he doesn't really handle anything else. And I think sometimes there's a value in having different people and different voices on your booking team and not one person that does everything. I think that was very prevalent during the Vince McMahon era, when you kind of you could just tell what Vince liked, and it just was over and over and over again. But I think it was great. I thought it was definitely my favorite match. I mean, the Danielson thing, super feel good. And I mean, the crowd popped right at the right time. I mean, it was a great ending and whatever, but I just, in my brain, the career step almost made it a moot issue because I knew he
Right.
wasn't retiring.
Yeah.
And I almost hate that stuff when they put career steps on matches. So it kind of hit a little of the drama for me, but I think overall, I mean, like I love that, but yeah, I thought that match was that match was my favorite.
It's funny you say the career step. I feel the same way, but I'm sitting here realizing like, everybody always does like the Cena coming back in 4 months from an injury instead of 8 or something like that. But because of because of how we look at career steps, it would actually be shocking if we didn't know someone was retiring or hurt and they did the reverse. And you act like it genuinely would have been shocking if Danielson had lost and retired.
I was kind of hoping that Nigel would cost them, and then they'd figure out a way to fuck the
Yeah. But I mean, there's something there for someone to really have an iconic retirement, because everybody assumes generally if there's a career step, like you can kind of guess which way it's going to go. Like, so if they ever went against that, I actually feel like it would be a real shock if you like didn't know how banged up someone was, which would be hard in the IWC era, or if you just didn't know they were really done. Like usually you know one way or another. You knew like a good one. Like if the reverse happened with Batista and Trips, for example, like if Trips, I mean, there's no way he would have known that his heart was going to explode in like 1 year. But if he had, it would have been genuinely shocking for him to lose that. And then Dave could have ran 6 more months and retired at SummerSlam or something, So I generally agree, like you kind of know which way they're going to go, but I do think there's an opportunity for some Fed to do a real actual surprise finish with those at some point.
I just think the problem is you got to get the guy to adhere to it too. Everybody comes back.
Well, that's why I like Sting's comeback. I know I had already texted Mike about it, but him coming back to save Darby did not break his retirement. He's not getting back in the ring, and I actually didn't mind that he waited as long as he did, because you're right. Usually in both, well, especially in AW, people wait till someone is like on death's door, and then they're like, "Well, hit my music." But I could see he wanted Darby to do it himself. He didn't get involved until the Bucks came in, and then he showed up. So. I mean, but yeah, I thought that was a perfect use for a retired guy. God knows. Yeah, we'll see. But you're right. Nearly everybody ruins it. I mean, how long was Ric Flair retired before he was in TNA? Never mind his last match, which I almost had to be on drugs to watch.
I was surprised that Sting didn't come out as his Jack the Ripper one, because they just put that action figure out. I was like, oh, money. He's going to come out and be his action figure. You're going to get more sales.
Oh man! Or I mean, the one promo we got of Joker Sting before he retired with Max. All I wanted was for him to do one pay-per-view feud with Max. If he was ever going to lose, let him lose to MJF. But I would have done more Joker Sting. I must admit, I was very, very excited for that. But also his retirement. I mean, like I cried during it. I mean, it was as perfect as a retirement can get.
Yeah.
So you know,
Absolutely.
Yeah, they handle. I mean, I think they. That's one thing you could say. I mean, that's a tricky. I think that's a tricky thing to handle. I don't necessarily know if I would have booked them. I don't know if I would have booked Sting if I had the ability to book him the way they did, but I think the way they did it was perfect. I think they got a lot of mileage out of him. Nobody wanted to see him lose. Big, big crowd pleasing stuff all the time, and and he obviously skated through it without any kind of serious injury. So I don't think you could ask for any more than that. And I thought it was a great surprise tonight too.
All right, so let's do our lowlights. My low light. Although Steve already did his. No, you can
I
do the
mean,
other one.
I like that you think that's all there is, but please go on.
No, my the low light for me, I was the tag title match. Like that was the one that like I felt like it was heatless. Again, like it felt like the story to get us there was just all over the place. So like there was no there for me. Like I feel like if it was just FTR and the Bucks, like at least they know each other well enough that the match would have felt like there was some continuity to it. But when you throw the Acclaimed in there, like it just didn't have any rhythm. And like,
can we talk about when Billy went up to Scissor and they ignored him? I felt so bad for him.
Yeah, poor guy. Yeah, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. Oh no, we lost Clutch. He'll come.
About Billy Gunn.
He did.
Yeah, he couldn't handle it.
Back,
Where you
sorry.
That was you stormed out.
I'm
so mad. I'm stuck with Billy Gunn, Mark. I can't. I had to go cry a little bit. Yeah, it's weird. The tag stuff is with the Bucks just being like non-existent for the past like few months. And I don't know. This whole Elite thing has just been kind of. I don't know. I haven't enjoyed this run of this new package of the Elite at all.
Well, the thing, Sean, what do you think? Like, I feel like a lot of it is that the whole thing is a wink and a nod. The whole thing is inside baseball. Like, there's no. And Josh, we were kind of talking about this in the podcast, and you're talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, yes, like his career journey as Steve Williams is interesting, but not all of that is quote unquote canon for Stone Cold. And in the same way, like you mentioned it twice, Sean, and I'm interested in your opinion. Like, yeah, I mean, Jack Perry's in the Elite because of things that happened out of canon. That's why he's in the Elite. And it feels kind of like it. They haven't done the story, like the in-story work to make it matter. I feel like that's why it's not hitting for me. I don't know if that is the reason for you, but like we all know why he's in it.
Yeah.
But that's like, when we read comics and because we know the players behind the scenes know why something really happened. But to be frank, like, the casual viewer and the casual reader doesn't know that.
The casual part has been the thing that for me has been such a the hiccup with AEW from the start is because they, as Tony says, the sickos of AEW. Like I admit it, dude. I went to the first All In. I've been AEW since the start, but it's like I try to tell friends or stuff about like, hey, this is who this is, and it's like it's a little bit. They have to know a little bit too much. Like I'm not gonna know every I'll watch. I'm not a huge New Japan guy. I'll watch it. I'll catch up just because I don't have the time to. But like when someone comes in, I'm like, give me a package. Let me see. Like, give me those little basic stuff. Like,
I'm right there with you.
I know it's like you can't get a person involved. I'm not on Twitter all the time watching clips. I'm not on YouTube all the time digging into who so and so is. Like they've done a good job with people as they've been able to have them on shows. Like Ishii is now one of my favorite dudes of all time. I've gone back and watched so much of his stuff. But like when he first popped up, I'm like, all right, this guy looks like a beast, but like I don't know anything about him. And it's like that goes to the thing with the inside baseball parts with the Elite. It's like they are playing to this stuff that you have to know all this knowledge. You have to know all this backstage stuff, the dirt sheets and all that stuff. Like give it out the door. Give me a couple, little vignettes of Razor Ramon popping out there, like living up in Miami. Like do that for every person coming through, and do that for like all these background stuff. Like give me the reason to understand what's going on.
I definitely feel like that's an issue, right? Like they have beats, but they don't necessarily have connective tissue to let stuff breathe. Like this was obviously a long time ago, but they broke up Chris Daniels and Frankie Kazarian, and like it happened off camera. Like they beat them and they went right to commercial, and then they're like, "Oh, off camera, here's one of the, biggest tag teams of the last decade, you know, breaking up or whatever. And like, I definitely get that. And I also feel like, I just feel like the Bucks are stuck in 2018, and they have been stuck in 2018 since 2018. And there just came a point where I feel like people don't want that anymore. They don't want the you know, there was a time when that was everybody lived for the insider shots and whatever. And that's, I mean, that's basically what made their career, but I just don't think people want that anymore. And Cody does it too much too on the other channel. Like, I don't know. I feel like it distracts from what you're doing. And I don't
Well, for better or worse, if you want to see how much the backstage stuff penetrates, look at the reaction when Punk makes an AEW reference on WWE. It's dead silent. Which is, you know,
or even broader than that, when Cody makes Bullet Club references, which you would think would be like, because people wear the t-shirts, right? Like, you see those t-shirts everywhere, but Cody will make a Bullet Club reference and like no reaction whatsoever.
I mean,
and Bullet Club is like one of the biggest things, like, in our heads. Bullet Club is like one of the biggest things of the past 20 years. And
when
like,
you've got five, well, actually, you've got even more than that. Like, how many Bullet Club members are now on the WWE roster? Like
almost
dozens.
It's so crazy, dude. Like with Tama in there, and you've got, you know, like, you could put together the OG Bullet Club without Fale, and you're there. You know, like, it's so wild to me that, but they've dropped the ball with all that stuff because they don't bring it back or they don't reuse it and give you the stuff like.
One of the things that I think was a big difference, and I noticed, I went to SummerSlam a few years ago, the one where Brock and Roman, where they had the crane and they lifted up the ring or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was a sold out stadium. And the one thing I noticed was I saw like 3 AEW shirts. And I think the thing is, right, for a long time, WWE was the whole thing. And then there was a segment of people that wanted WWE to be something different. And it was never going to be that. And now that they have AEW, I don't think they go to WWE shows. And that's why you don't get like the hijacking that you used to get. Because now, like, those fans watch that show. And there's definitely fans that watch both. But I think the vocal fans that were just mad that WWE wasn't New Japan are now satisfied because they get what they want in AEW. And then WWE fans are satisfied because they get what they want out of WWE. And I think, so you don't necessarily get the, you know, maybe the longer term fans aren't necessarily there, the insider Japanese fans or whatever. So that's definitely a thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, doing the live streams. You get this, like, my streams, because I stream both. The chats are filled with people who hate the other one, no matter what show you're doing.
Well, that's the internet,
right? But it's like, it's weird that they take the time to not, like, they're not even watching what you're live streaming. They're just there to complain about that show. It's sort of wild to me.
It's true, Mike.
How much there's like just sheer despondency about the other brand and what's wrong with the other brand and why. So like they're on an AEW live stream just to say, I fucking hate AEW and this is what's wrong with AEW and this is why I hate AEW.
I mean, it's everything, but I think the other thing too is that, like, it's mostly for quote unquote the audience, right? Like, I mean, I don't think I'm making news here to say that something we're all familiar with. Like, I mean, and granted, there's always outliers, but like among creators, the DC versus Marvel feud is not real. Of course, with some, I'm sure there's always going to be someone. But likewise, like, I remember like a year ago or 2 years ago, Kenny gave some interview and said that he thought Roman was awesome. And like the internet like was fucking losing their mind. And like, but of course he does, because all that stuff is not for the people that actually do it. Like, they just want to do their job and you know, and get shit done. And I think it's very similar, right? Like, because people, I mean, people obviously think the feuds between the big two are real. And again, like, I think creators just want to make what they can make and have the best time possible. But I just remember how shocked people were. Oh, Kenny, how could you say that about Roman? Well, imagine that. Like, one of the top guys at one company thinks the top guy at the other is actually good at this. Like, there's like, that's like no news to me, but for the people who are showing up to say they hate something, that's like the ultimate sin, right? Which I think is very amusing.
I do think the guys that feed into it, the talent that feeds into it, I think either are, you know, occasionally you have people that are just super marks for themselves and that's whatever. But then I think also it's just a new grift, right? Like, I love wrestling and, you know, and they all do, but like, I'm always skeptical of anybody that's like, oh, this is my film study, and whatever. I mean, I'm not totally calling out FTR here, but it's I
Well,
think
sometimes you ever consider that? I mean, like I've always said, like people, I think it's the easiest thing in the world for wrestlers to recreate kayfabe by just kayfabe being their social media preference, or pardon me, presence. Like everybody thinks what people say on social when like what workers say is real, and it'd be the easiest thing in the world to just have it not be real. Like I mean, again, I could be wrong. For example, I don't know Seth Rollins, but I would guess that I would guess he's often working, when he gets into things with AEW people, because why wouldn't he be? And everybody assumes that, like, how could these people possibly be fake on social media, which is hilarious in of itself.
I mean, some of these
But it
guys
would be
really
the
don't
easiest
like
thing in the
each
world.
other. I mean, some of those guys are petty and don't like each other and can be easily triggered, for certain. But
Well, of course, people tell me your books are good all the time, and then I have to, like,
What? Let's settle this in the cage, guys.
What about the rest of you guys? What were the things in the show that that didn't work for you?
Britt and Monet. Just that no heat on me on that feud this entire time. Like, and I love Britt Baker. I think she's fantastic. But and maybe it's just also just Monet's entire run that she's had so far has just been kind of lackluster, but just no heat for me.
to me,
Although I
she's
do pop Camille. She's badass.
she's like Cody to me, where like she needs, I think she's an incredible wrestler. I think she's got incredible presence and star power and whatever. But I think sometimes she's got to listen to somebody that says, "Hey, maybe this isn't good," and that kind of whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it didn't click, and I think there were a ton of people on Twitter who thought because they put Jamie Hayter on the pre-show that Becky Lynch was coming out after this match. So they like Royal Rumbled themselves into, not being happy about stuff, which also sort of doubles down how dumb that Jamie Hayter pre-show thing was. But
Right.
but yeah, I was following the hashtag a little bit just to try to see what people's perceptions are and stuff to talk about around here, and that was one of the things that people were definitely mad about. And
It seems, yeah, there was people on my live stream who were talking about like, oh, Becky's coming out, and I was like, did you not see the documentary about her that was literally like 2 hours of her talking about how much she loves the WWE and how it's her family and how she would never leave?
and her husband just resigned, so
Yeah, and her husband just signed, like, and how the whole reason that she's there, like, how much she loves how easy it is to have her family there.
I also
and how
think
they,
that whole thing's a
you know-
work anyway. I think she's under a short-term extension. So
Yeah,
but whatever.
but it just doesn't, and it doesn't, like, the Ricochet thing makes sense, right? His fiance is an announcer. That's different than my husband is the biggest star and we have a kid.
well, Malachi is doing that, but it's not like Zelina is
He didn't
operating
have a
it.
choice either, though. He got
Yeah.
fired and then went there
Yeah.
and signed a long-term contract,
Buddy just re-signed with AEW too, and Rhea's over there. So,
which is a bold move. But I mean, they did just get married, and that does speak to that
Yeah.
he must have gotten a big paycheck. So
But also,
That's different than having when you have a kid, especially a kid that age.
well, and they
That's
care
the
about,
difference.
I mean, Becky brings Rue everywhere. I mean, I've
Yeah,
met her like a half a dozen times. So,
yeah,
I do think too. There's a situation where like the known, like what you got at AEW versus what you're gonna get back into at WWE. How that plays out and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I will say this, like going kind of tying it to Buddy and Malachi and stuff like that. Like I thought the House of Black was gonna win tonight. That's kind of who I had picked. Actually, I picked the Patriarchy, but I was House of Black too. But great for Pac and the Pac Pool Combat Club is what I'm going to call them now.
Thank you, Sean. I also said that. Calling
Yeah,
it the
that's right.
Bastard Combat Club, fucking stupid. It's the Pac Pool Combat Club.
Yeah,
It's right there.
so good. But I was really surprised, and I feel bad for him not being able to have that with the Death Triangle guys, because I love that act. The three of them together has been one of those like highlights for me when I go to events and being able to see all those guys. Like I love kind of catching up with them, and I was hoping that they'd kind of be able to do it. So yeah.
I would say that the weird part of that match for me was that Pac celebrated like he won a singles title, and Claudio and Yuta were not in the ring with him, which I thought was weird. Like,
I thought they came in towards the end of it, didn't they? Like
no, Yuta sat on the ring steps. And
That's
Claudio
really-
stood next to him. Like I was like, what is going on here?
Well, they also, I guess,
He
like,
had
they
his
got there.
Wembley moment. God damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah. We can say like those guys did get like they came out at the end with Daniel. I thought it was really cool. Like, you know,
You
It's weird that Moxley wasn't on the show in any
disparage.
capacity.
That who? Oh,
Moxley
Moxley.
wasn't on the show in any capacity, even to do like an opening, like fire up the crowd promo that he does. Like he super
Yeah.
excels at. Like
he was my guess for the casino match. I thought he was going to be the guy. I was like, oh, he's just going to come out and be the dude. I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's going to lead to a really crazy thing with him and Brian. But like, you know, it didn't happen.
I was surprised there was no Bobby Lashley on the show.
I'm actually I'm shoot excited for that. I hope he comes through. Like I would love to see him and MVP come through with Shelton and then raise up some younger dude and have like their cool foursome.
I think it's.
I mean, fuck, Leo Rush is right there. He was Bobby's hype man back in the day, for not his best era, but it's still.
No.
Let me pitch you this. What if it's the three of them and Hobbs?
Oh, Hobbs would be
Oh,
ridiculous. Like that's a dude. Like honestly, like he's been so mismanaged this entire time. Like I just don't understand. Like him and the Miro thing when they were doing that, I was like, okay, like this is gonna lead to something, and then just nothing and nothing and nothing.
This is what I tell you about big guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the.
Don't I know?
The overwhelm. that's their fun, and it's funny because they always say, right, like Booker's push who they are, right? Vince pushed bodybuilders, you know, Baba pushed tall guys, right? So I mean, Tony's a littler guy, so him wanting to see, you know, littler guys beat bigger guys is probably.
And why isn't Marco Stunt the champion right now? Make it happen.
I mean, it's my wrestling gimmick that I've often pitched people on the indies is I want like a Captain Marvel type gimmick actually, and it would involve Marco Stunt and I usually say Jake something, so we'll go with that right now. And it would be exactly what you think it is. Like he would say like a fucking magic word, and he would like drink his spinach, and there would be a lights out, and when they came back on, he would be Jake something. But it would be the same. But it would be the same person.
Dude, that's so freaking good. Holy shit!
I had this idea years ago for Bo Dallas because, like, when they had him on, that he was smaller and he would just get beat up, and then they send him to the future, and he'd come back, and it would be Baron Corbin. And he was all when he had like the long hair and shit because he looked so much like him. And then Corbin was just like Bo Dallas from the future, like all jacked up and ready to destroy people.
That's awesome.
What about you, Mike? What was your low point for the show?
Yeah, I mean, the Jamie Hayter thing really bothers me. Positioning is such a big deal, and you know what I mean. Like, I feel like they've set her up to fail by bringing her in on the pre-show. Like you've already said, like when they brought Thunder Rosa back, she was so popular, and they brought her back in a tag match on Collision with Abaddon. Like you've got to make a big deal out of stuff. I mean, if you don't care, the audience isn't going to care.
Right.
And I mean, wrestling more than anything else, more than moves, more than anything is hype. And you gotta put these people in their moments, right? Like, and I just think that's I don't know. Well, I think their women's division is tough. You know, they've had a lot of people there that have been there forever, and it's tough to make things special or whatever. And I think you've got an accomplished wrestler who was popular and coming back. Like, I mean, she should have come out. She could have come out at the end of the Mercedes Britt match, or, you know, or Deanna could have come out at least or something. I mean, I feel like they didn't do a lot to showcase their women. There's like 80 people on the card between the pre-show and the thing. I think they had 6 women.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, if you want people to care, they got to care. I mean, AEW, like the wrestling is always great, right? Like the wrestling is never a problem. You know, you're going to see enjoyable matches, or whatever. But, you know, yeah, sometimes the story beats and there's some like just unforced errors that to me kind of, I don't know, always get my goat.
Yeah.
I mean, even it's funny, like even then the women's matches they did have, right? Like the Willow match, making it essentially, I mean, it didn't play like a comedy match, but it was a comedy match.
It was
right?
one.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
was a vehicle for Stokely and Ishii, which.
And I'm here to say, like, I think Willow, I mean, it's not that they ever bury her, but I think she has top star potential. Like she
100%.
has such a crowd connection. In a way, I wish she would go to WWE, but I could see them saying she was, quote, not in shape, which is bullshit. But because she doesn't look like a traditional WWE women's wrestler, but like, I don't know, like to me, she's kind of like if the original Hugger Bailey wasn't a little bit cringe. Like
Yeah.
I can't really put my finger on it. It doesn't seem like an act for her. Like that just seems.
It's because she has like a real punk rock edge to her, right? That's
and
what
she
that's
can
what
go.
the difference
She's got
is.
power, you know.
Yeah.
Like I honestly, like, it was never going to happen, but like, I mean, the crowd was behind her in her match with Mercedes. Like she was never going to win that match, but I just, you know, like,
Yeah, I think part of why
there.
the audience turned on Mercedes was because they're behind Willow, right? As much as everyone says like it's because of Mercedes being Mercedes or that she's not living up to it, I think part of it is they were confused because they really like Willow and they want Willow to succeed, and her losing to Mercedes feels wrong.
Also,
it feels like the wrong booking choice, you know?
To belabor a point that we talked about before with narratives and stuff, everybody hated Brock Lesnar for the longest time because they thought he didn't like wrestling, and he did. You know, I mean, obviously there's issues now, but you know, I mean, for the longest time, everybody's like, Brock Lesnar hates wrestling, and you know, they boo him, right? Because they thought he hated wrestling, but he didn't. You know, what I mean, it was just what he was doing. And I mean, there's a lot of people that think Mercedes is too good for her fans. She doesn't like to sign autographs or whatever. So there's like real, like, sort of entitlement heat that people have with her, no matter what she does. Like, she could have come in and hit a home run, and there's going to be a segment of the fan base is never going to accept her because she doesn't sign autographs at an airport, which whatever is dumb. So I mean, So I think that there's some of that too with her. I also think she's a natural heel.
Yeah, trying to put her over as a face was a weird choice coming in, especially with that gimmick. Especially because that gimmick and the Elite's gimmick is so complementary, and that it seems like they didn't figure out. It feels like Tony was like a month and a half in. He was like, "Oh shit, it's the same gimmick."
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. We have the same.
She should have come in and run that faction.
Yeah.
Right. Like she should have been like, I'm the CEO of the Elite, and just go with that and then build from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird choice. What about you, Steve? What was your amartia for the show?
Well, yeah, I mean, other than, like I said, like, I'm not angry about the returns, but they all, with the exception of Garcia, I feel like they all could have gotten. You could have gotten more out of them. So that means, or debuts. So that means Jamie, that means Ricochet. I mean, how do you burn that? Again, if he's just going to, like, I mean, do a lot of cool shit and then just fucking disappear. And of course, Nigel. But beyond that, no, I agree with Sean. I think the Britt Sasha match, for whatever reason, it's just not working. And I actually, and yeah, there was not a lot of heat on it. I don't love Britt the way other people do, but I think she's very, very solid. And I don't know why Sasha isn't working for me that much in AEW. Like, if I unpack it, because usually, and Kingston can attest to this, usually someone I don't like in WWE comes to AEW and I like them more. Like, I'll be the first to say that. I did not like, I can't even remember what his name was now. I didn't like Dean Ambrose. I hated the fucking lunatic lariat. I hated the whole thing. The greasy, I just got out of the gutter hair. Like, I did not like looking at him. He looked unwashed, you know, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the weird Looney Tunes facial expressions. And then when he came to AEW and went back to being Moxley, like, it wasn't a huge shift. It's like a 5% change, but it worked for me. And I was not a huge Daniel Bryan fan. I mean, I can acknowledge his skill, but I mean, this is not me saying he was bad, but for whatever reason, I just was never that into his matches, with the exception of when he was working heel. And I thought that was his best, like, in his return era, I thought that was his best work there. But when he came and got a little more bloodthirsty in AEW, it sort of worked for me more. And I can't say why that's not the case with Mercedes / Sasha. I can't really put my finger on it.
I think it's the 5% you were talking about. That 5%.
Yeah, but it's like 5% of the wrong direction in this case. But usually, I guess what I'm saying is I can't name it. Like with Moxley, it's that he stopped being a weird cartoon character who doesn't shower. Like I can say what it was. And with Danielson, it was that he stopped being he was a little less gee whiz and a little more I'm gonna kill you. And with Sasha, I don't really know. Like her smile does look a little more fake and a little more politician-y. But I don't really know, like beyond that. But for some reason, it just usually I feel like when people get a little more control when they leave WWE, they elevate themselves, but it doesn't feel elevated, or at least not in the right direction for me. But I can't really put my finger on it either. She's still a great in the ring, of course. She's never been a great promo, so it's not like that's changed. But yeah, I don't know. Like so I have to agree that it was Britt and Mercedes. But as far as like her character, I can't really pin it down. And I feel like if they made like one change once again, maybe it would even just be a mouthpiece, because she doesn't feel, and you could spin that, for the things that Kingston's talking about, like the fans don't even deserve to hear her, right? So she has someone talking for her. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just not connecting with me, which is weird because it was the opposite. I was a huge fan of hers and Sasha in WWE, to the extent when I was on Supergirl, like these websites were like, what songs do you, what is your Supergirl soundtrack? And one of the songs I listed was the Sasha Banks WWE theme. So I was a fan, but somehow it's just not clicking for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way they should book her is with the EVPs, and you let the EVP, like, you make her the silent CEO, like you make her the shadowy, like she's the boss, and they talk for her, right? And you put her in charge. She's the highest paid person on the roster. Her contract gives her complete freedom, and within that freedom, they have to keep her happy. And so they're like, it's sort of like, it's a way to give everybody, it gives all of that storyline a little more focus, and it gives her more edge, and it lets her not have to talk. I think there's a lot you could do with her that they're not doing. And she comes off, instead of coming off as like regal or coming off as powerful, she comes off as whiny. And I think that's a lot of what the problem is, right? Is that she's supposed to feel authoritarian, and she just doesn't.
But do you think that maybe it's because she's so much more of a star than anybody else on the roster? Because WWE used to run into this problem, right? Like they booked Roman and Brock and whatever, and there were like 5 guys that you could conceivably win the title. Then you'd throw him like a Claudio for like a banger B-show pay-per-view match, but you never thought he was going to win. Like who there really matches up with her star power? I mean, Britt's probably the closest, but she just came back.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing, right? Like Willow's got star potential, but she's not pushed like that. None of the women are pushed like that.
I mean, I was gonna say you could build. I mean, a year from now, if she's still champ, you could build Willow into beating her, and I think that it would get to a point where people would be all in for it. No pun intended.
Yeah.
They had the same problem with Jade, right? Like, I mean, Jade's matches had no heat, even though she was an incredible character, whatever, because you never thought she was going to lose.
I mean, Nyla was her best feud, but that's because they let Nyla be funny, and also she stole her car.
I don't know. It's interesting because that's the WWE has that problem with Cody right now, right? Like Cody feels like he has nobody to compete with, right? Like on all of SmackDown, I was talking about this on the live stream earlier. Like, on SmackDown, there's no heels who feel like they have a chance of beating him.
Well, there will be.
So you keep, what's that?
I said I think there will be. I think Randy, a heel turn for Randy Orton. I think LA Knight, like Cody's expressed an interest in wrestling LA Knight. I think you could have some matches that have some drama. But yeah, he is a little overpowered.
Right? Like it feels like even putting him, and what they did in WWE with Solo Sikoa is like a crime against Solo Sikoa, right? They decided to make this guy who is totally not ready to be in charge, like to have that much weight put on his shoulders. They put that much weight on him, and they made him like now act like a star. Off you go to be way more powerful than you can handle, like in terms of all of your skill set. So I mean, it's a weird thing that I think is sort of across the board in wrestling right now. Like there's a dearth in WWE of heels, and I think like it's almost a problem. I mean, it's a problem that AEW has in that, like, because everybody's a tweener in AEW, it always feels like there's not the right mix of heels and faces, right? So then you have Swerve, right? And how weird is like Swerve's? That's why Swerve's run has been so weird. Is he's pretty damn heely,
So he's evil
But
as
then,
F.
but then also he's Team AEW, right? And he's against the Young Bucks, right?
right?
A little uneven. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's an incredible wrestler, and I think he's done an incredible job with what they've given him. But I do feel like he's been booked a little uneven.
I mean, I
But
think in
now-
both cases you can build it, you know, like if you, but as Mike was saying, it's all about the hype. Like if someone returns, and again, your mileage may vary. I can only speak about myself. Like there is a dearth of heels in WWE. At the same time, you know, I think Reed, for example, got a lot from putting Seth out, and all it took is him completely fucking murdering him in one show. You know,
I know, but he's on the wrong show. He's on
well,
Raw.
but of course,
Raw's
but this
fine.
is, and it's also important to say, of course, now he has to keep fucking winning.
Right.
I mean,
Follow-ups
that
is
got
always
him. I
key
would
for
I
that.
would argue that got him up to the plate. Where
Right.
you were like, oh, this dude is a player, and now he's got to keep winning. You know, until presumably whatever, you know, wherever they want to take him. So I think it's possible, right? Like, but again, it's hard. Much like with the F5 thing, I don't really know the alchemy. This is why I'm not a wrestling booker of when things feel organic and when they don't. Like the Reed thing worked great for me. At the same time, like Solo just axe murdering John Cena did not work for me. Like even though that's canon in the story, it felt too try hard, you know, maybe because it was such a leap, you know, to actually be winning in a match versus jumping a guy and killing him like Reed did. I can't really put my finger on it, but it can be done. Like I similarly, like, you know, you were talking about if Hobbs comes back and you get Lashley and all those guys, like, and that could be your ultimate heel faction right there, provided they come back and make a big splash and just fucking murder everybody. Because to be honest, like Lashley and Hobbs in real life, and I hate to use that phrase, look like they could handle anyone on the roster. They just have to not be booked to lose in laughable ways.
I think one of the things WWE, I mean, outside of obviously this run for Roman that was incredibly successful, has traditionally been a babyface company. They sell the
Right.
merch, you know, they're appealing to kids. It's always baby faces on top for the most part. You know, they got away. I mean, for a long time, it was just the Hogan and the Cena, you know, whatever. There's always been that sort of top baby face that's selling stuff and beating people. And eventually that gets to be long in the tooth for people. But that's always been who they were. And I guess considering the fact that, like, you know, obviously for years, right, it was Hogan and Flair, and Hogan was the heel champion and whatever. And then WWE won that feud, right? Like they won that battle. They put that other company out of business. So, I mean, I guess there's merit to it. Maybe it's not super exciting for adults, but, you know, kids, I think, you know, they're selling action figures and whatever. So.
Well, I also think Cody is turning heel within the year, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know that
I think he sells too many T-shirts.
There's no way.
I think fans are going to turn on him. Just to be honest, because
If that happens, that's fine.
That could
I
happen.
don't think he's going to want to. Like, I should restate that. I don't think he's going to want to. But I might have even said this the last time we talked. Like, I think there's and I would love for people to disagree. By the way, like this is not, but I think there's an expiration date on his man of the people gimmick because, to be frank, he's not his dad, and he's not his dad in a lot of ways that are. I mean, I think Dusty was one of the greatest to ever do it. But part of Dusty is that he looked like your neighbor. Like he's a big fat guy that can, and he was great on the mic, but he looked like an everyman. Cody wants to be that, but Cody's life is not like yours. You know, Cody has he has a smoking hot wife, and he solved racism. And
he sure did.
And you know, he drives around in a bus. He dresses like he skull fucks an American Eagle on the way to the ring. Like he just, no matter what his promos are, like he is not. You look at him and you're not like that dude is like me. You know, so I think that. Yeah, maybe I'm, you know, I wouldn't be sad if I was right or wrong because I like Cody, but I do think the time is going to come where people are going to be like, this dude is not like us, like, and they're going to turn on him. No, maybe not, but I just think like a key element of Dusty, unfortunately, was that Dusty part of it was the look and the lifestyle, and he was like the people watching, especially NWA at that time. But who among us lives a life like Cody?
I expect there's going to be a 4 Horsemen run with him at some point, maybe with like Spears and Starks and Ethan Page or some, you know, some collection of guys, maybe some big muscle guy or whatever. But yeah, I get what you're saying about it. I mean, I feel it even more strongly for Punk. Like, I feel like Punk has turned into a cheerleader, and that's, I mean, he does not feel authentic. And even if it is, that's not what it feels like for a guy that's
every time I see him in a suit, I'm like, what is happening? This is the weirdest thing in the world.
So, and maybe, I mean, honestly, like, I know that they're setting up for him and Seth, or, you know, possibly, I know there were talks at one point about Austin. So maybe he's just setting himself up for a heel turn, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, but I definitely feel like some of the stuff he's been doing lately, I mean, the storylines have been great. I feel like they kept the guy relevant while he was hurt, which I think was impressive. But I do think sometimes when he goes out, he's like, I love you guys because you cheer me. Like, it's a weird thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
I have a weird thing that popped in my brain, but Steve, and we're talking about the Nigel stuff. I really feel like they dropped the ball. I agree with you on it, but why didn't they do like the Jerry Lawler Royal Rumble thing, where it's like have him on commentary, just running down Brian, talking about like any of these guys could beat him, and then music hits and he's like, so can I, and he pops up and just jumps in there and does it like that way. Like, I think that would have been better than like the long ramp of just like, it was cool to see that part. And I'm sure for him, it's like they wanted to give everyone their flowers of like every British wrestler, like, all right, cool, like we're not gonna be back here for a while, do your thing, have fun. But that to me would have popped because he's on the mic. Like, he has been so good the past few months of just like talking trash about Brian. And it's like, I play clips for my wife and she's like, this guy is hilarious. And I think that they missed out on him not being talking.
No, I agree. Actually, Sean, I was sure, you know, for the Owen finals, for whatever reason, Nigel was randomly put on commentary on Dynamite that night, even though he's never on Dynamite. And I was like, this is it. Like, he's getting up and he's fucking him. And then they're going to have their match at All In. And that didn't happen either. So, no, I agree. I mean, listen, I want to be wrong, by the way. I hope he comes back. I hope him and Dragon have a match. Like, I really do. But I don't know that the track record is there for me to feel confident that that's going to happen.
He's one of those guys that I've always felt was like actually properly retired. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you see other dudes who like jump over to commentary, like, all right, he could probably get back in there and do it. But like, he was always the one I'm like, yeah, I think he's really, really done. Like, but you know, there's never really done.
I mean, Tony's such a big Ring of Honor fan, like old school Ring of Honor fan. And I think he's handled Samoa Joe much better than I ever expected that he would. So, I mean, I think there is a reverence for that time period, which is why Danielson obviously gets treated very well too. So there's part of me that thinks that he is going to do Nigel proud. And I do think Nigel
Punk was also a Ring of Honor guy, Kinger. So,
well, he did do him. I mean, I think he did
do him proud until Punk, you know,
Punk
decided to do until Punk punked himself.
I mean, I have some differing opinions there, but it's
whatever the opinion is, they all effed themselves up. They all lost a shit ton of money by being a bunch of giant men.
Well, they're all the same.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think running that footage was amazing because the only person that got over in that footage was Joe, for everybody running away from him the minute he stepped in.
I think that I don't know. I think those guys are all the same person, and I think that it's just tough for people when they're like that to do business without a strong person to step in between them and be like, hey. Yeah. But I also think if you're an executive vice president, you shouldn't be playing pranks on guys and whatever and feeding into like there's an HR component there that is nuts.
Actually,
you can't have a swing on people, but whatever.
Yeah. You bring up the EVP thing that bounces my brain back to the thing with Monet of just like her being the CEO. It's like there's so much real EVP and like business titles that are intertwined in these storylines, and for her to come in like, I'm the CEO, but you're like, I'm sorry, lady, you're not the CEO of nothing. Like, this is a tagline. It's like, it didn't, if you said like what Josh was saying earlier, if she came in and was like, hey, I'm actually like, Tony hired me to run this ship. Like, cool. Like I would buy that a million times over, you know, like.
I also don't know why Tony Khan can't overrule
find a better word for boss. And that is why she's the CEO.
Yeah.
Um,
If she would have come in and be like, "I'm that bitch," done. I would have all my
Actually,
money
you know
on that
what?
person.
yes.
All my money.
That was Jade, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And also, like, I mean, that's something that does bother me about AEW's women's division is like, I don't know. I just feel like somebody should be able to cut a promo without using bitch. Like,
To be
Just
clear,
fun.
Okada can't do that either, Kingston. So,
the refrain maker.
I say that on my phone. It's so funny. It's like the
Yeah.
best.
But yeah, it's wild. It's definitely. But I mean, I think overall, like I said, I left the show feeling happy. I enjoyed it largely while I was watching it. Like I thought the Casino Battle Royal was a lot of fun. Like going through it, I thought the ending was a little wonky, but whatever. I mean, I'm assuming that leads to Edge down the road, maybe when he comes back or something with Christian. But it's fine. Like I thought Sting was there was a lot to make a wrestling fan happy.
Yeah.
So
I will note as well, it's funny to me the things that happen. Like you mentioned Edge, I just had to say, like, on the topic of things that you're surprised major companies let slide, it's genuinely always very amusing to me when someone comes to AEW and like whoever their lawyer is must be watching trademark and licensing. Like the fact that Edge could come over and have the Edge music and the Hardys could come over and have the Hardy music because they must have just swooped in for the split second.
The Hardy music was like library music.
stock music, yeah.
It was stock music. That's why. So
And
the
I think-
WWE didn't compose music for them because they never thought that they would be anything.
And they were probably too cheap
which
to
is-
license Edge's
yeah.
music because it was an actual song.
It was a band, yeah.
Well, they have to though, don't they? I mean, like, how else do you get it? Like, it's
Right,
not
but when he's done, right? Like they don't want to keep paying for that. Like that's just they probably just don't care. I mean, obviously, if they wanted him to stay, they would have given him whatever he wanted, right? So they obviously didn't think that he was going to be that big of a threat, and they want him to go and just be happy and do whatever. I mean, I don't think anybody's got bad blood against Edge for, it's the same with Daniel Bryan. It's the same with Jon Moxley. Like those guys all went to AEW because WWE wouldn't let them do the things that they wanted to do. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think people necessarily have bad blood per se. And, they all kind of did, they did
At least
business
not.
the
At
right-
least not now. I think. Right now that Vince is gone, I'm sure that it's much less. There's less anger towards them going off to do their own thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the Christian thing, I loved the gauntlet, as I said, but we'll see what happens with it because the contract basically is like Money in the Bank now, right? But to be honest, do I want to necessarily see him and Danielson? I mean, I actually think it'd be pretty good, but it's not like top of my list. So I do kind of wonder if there's going to be shenanigans there. Although
you assume that they would use it for All Out because All Out is so soon.
Well, and the
there's
other
no
thing is,
build
yeah,
to
you
it.
could build a really easy program. I mean, what is Christian like doing more than like saying blasphemous things about family? And I mean, Swerve said a little bit, but that was like a saucant compared to the shit that Christian could hypothetically say. And God love him for that. I mean, no, truly, like I said, for all of my like saying I thought it was a weird for him to win the thing, like I think he is doing great heel work. I think that the whole package is great. The stupid fucking turtleneck that he wrestles in, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's delightful.
I have this
Truly
idea in my
delightful.
head that there's like a preliminary guy that's in the locker room that's just looking for an angle to get on TV, and he's cutting his dad's brake line so maybe he can get a program with Christian. So I'm gonna get on TV one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, that's the majesty of his heel work, right? Like, I don't know what feud it was. It was probably Darby, but like at that point, all he had to do was say, like, "Don't you have a father?" Which is like that's all he that's like all he opened with, and the whole crowd was like, "Oh shit," because you just know he's gonna say something truly like you're going to hell level.
I mean, my beef with it is just like the rest of the match was so good, and you have so like when you draw out any of the other possibilities for what those matches look like.
Oh, so, yeah, no, listen,
Ricochet and Danielson, like especially because we didn't know Danielson was going to win, right? So you could have had Ricochet versus Danielson, you could have had Ricochet versus Swerve, you could have had Nigel versus Danielson, you could have had literally any of them. it would have gotten us to Hangman versus Swerve. It would have gotten us to Hangman versus Danielson. Like, it's a weird choice. It's like just another very like Tony Khan odd decision.
Well, I will
right?
tell you that Christian is one of Tony Khan's favorite wrestlers, like of all time. So
Right.
I mean, he's treated him very well. But also, I do think they put themselves in a unique problem, like so almost a problematic booking position with All In and All Out, because then you have this, that happened last year too, where you have this huge build to All In, and then you got boom, you got to turn it around quick. So I mean, maybe that's
Well, it's
you know,
not as
WWE
quick this time, though, right? It's a couple
WWE
weeks.
what's that?
It was like
It's not-
last year it was 1 week, and I think
Right.
this year it's like 2 or 3.
But I mean, like WWE does it with, they did it with WrestleMania is over, right? Like nobody thinks AJ Styles is going to beat him, but they're going to have a banger match, and people will be happy with it. They can, Christian's little faction gives them enough storyline grist for the mill, and they can have an okay match, and they'll have Swerve and Hangman drinking each other's blood or some shit, and people will be happy.
People
right?
love that
Like
shit.
it'll be fine.
I mean, they've already done that. At some point, they're just going to be eating each other's flesh. Like we've already done the blood drinking.
They do.
I'm like the one. I'm the one guy who I'm just sort of done with Hangman and Swerve. Like I just don't need any more of it. Like I'm good.
I think Hangman's
I mean,
doing
I
the
do
best
wonder
stuff
how
that
they
he's
can
done
escalate
ever
it, Josh.
right now.
Like to the discussion we're having. Like, how do you escalate that feud again? Like Swerve fucking drank his actual blood. So
Swerve, yeah,
short of
Swerve,
some
Swerve
like
threatened his
Tommy Dreamer
child.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, short of him like getting shot. Like what can we do?
I think it's going to be. I mean, I had the headcanon today watching them today, and I was like, oh, at some point, like in the next like 2 years, Heyman will have a program higher up, with the card with the belt, and then Swerve is going to screw him over, and then at some point they're going to end up being tag partners against some other folks, and then they're going to be best friends for like a year, and then Swerve's going to betray him or something. Like they're just. I'm excited for this really long-term storyline, but they do need to pull them apart for a little bit and then bring them back together. I think they've been in it for too long right now.
Well, Hangman was gone for a long time. I mean, he just came.
Well, maybe
he just
a
came
couple more
back.
months from you then.
I do think, to me, like I've always felt they kind of misfired with Hangman on a lot. I mean, they spent a lot of time building him up, but they just never really, I feel like, hit it with him. But I feel like what he's doing, I feel like is the most interesting he's been. I personally always felt like Hangman could have been their John Cena. I feel like he fights. He's got great chemistry with guys that are bigger than him. I know a lot of people like the Danielson matches and the draws and stuff, but to me, I thought Lance Archer was his best title defense. I think they beat the piss out of each other. It was blood. It looked like a real, just a fight. And I think Hangman's got that. I don't think he needs to wrestle. I don't think he needs to do spots. I think he needs to fight. I think he could be their John Cena babyface if they, chose to go that route with him.
It is exciting to see young Silas Young do something, which is really nice.
He does look. He really looks
Silas now is so funny and then back in the Ring of Honor and stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's so full circle. But yeah, it's great.
I think he's just watching TV, like son of a bitch, that could have been me. It's like it's just full Uncle Rico.
Oh
What do they do with Ricochet? I mean, do they just put him in a program with Ospreay now?
Ospreay. Yeah, I think they do that.
I think the bigger question is, what do you do after that? Like that's actually the biggest problem they have is the second feud, or I shouldn't say problem, but the biggest hurdle.
I mean, they could do a series. I think they could very easily do like a best of 3 or best of whatever. I mean, those guys aren't ever going to have a bad match or a non-exciting match.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think keep them away for a little bit, right? For 6 months, have them do a couple different programs with other folks, and then lead to it. Like,
I don't think they can do that. I mean,
so?
they brought FTR in, right, and they were right to the Bucks.
True.
I mean, I think you set it up as that like sort of Super Bowl whatever, and then Ricochet comes in with some gravitas and not, Yeah. I think that you go from there. I mean, they have a great match or whatever, and then you can do something off of that. I mean, that's an easy thing that they could do for All Out if they want to sell a lot of tickets. I mean, there is always a value in holding on to stuff, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be their booking style.
Look, I'm a comic collector. I hold on to stuff for way too long. In nature.
And one day
I
it'll
feel
be
like
worth so much more. One day, if you just keep waiting.
I think in AEW at least everything is still canon. Like I feel like canon in WWE is at most 2 years. Like I remember The thing, I don't know why this. Listen, we are comics people. Random things bother us. But like the fact that Braun Strowman debuted and was ragdolling Roman, I mean ragdolling him like to the point of unconsciousness, and then within 2 years he was just eating shit for him. It like I felt like yeah, like it just didn't happen. Like in the eyes, like I really do feel like at least booking at the time was like, well, people don't remember it didn't happen. You know,
I
if it
can't
was
believe he's
2.5
never played
years
the
ago-
cello again,
Uh,
or whatever the
fuck you,
bass or
Kingston,
whatever.
because that was actually the best Braun Strowman spot I've ever seen. Complete with his meat hands being so big that he broke the fucking strings immediately. Honestly, I could watch that again right now. I think it's unintentionally a masterpiece from top to
That
bottom.
is the weird thing about the WWE. Like even doing the Wyatt Six stuff and then not using him feels like just odd. Like
Well, they're going to be a 6-member, I assume. So it's maybe it's him or Alexa, but
I'd assume it would
you're
be
right.
Alexa.
Yeah.
I
Like, it's
mean,
just-
that being said, you could. I mean, yeah, you're right, Josh. It is weird. I mean, you could lean in and have him feud with them, you know, which I assume will happen at some point. But you know, it's a funny one. It's a funny thing. Like, I actually think he's a great, one of the better, more athletic big men we've seen. And I keep feeling like it's failure to launch. But I look at the calendar and I'm like, well, he's been there for like 8 years, so maybe he's just not going to launch. You
It's
know,
always
I mean, he can
crazy.
do shit. My favorite feud he had was with Big Show. He could do, I mean, those matches were unexpectedly good because he could do shit with Big Show that no one else could.
Yeah.
And I keep waiting for like, yeah, when is that run going to happen? And I realized like, well, I've been watching since 2015 and he debuted like a year later. So maybe this just is what we're getting.
Look, the train has already left the station, right?
Well, some of it too,
Oh,
right?
Jesus.
Some of it is also, you know, that you see a guy that's got all the ability in the world, and then you're like, why don't these people get pushed? And there's usually reasons for it.
Well, he did yell at Kurt Angle's kid, which is hilarious.
His wife, and you know, I mean, look at Miro,
Like, yeah, I can't because I haven't seen him in
right?
a year.
I mean,
But you know, like if you're in multiple companies, you know what I mean, and you're a problem everywhere. Like at some point, right? Like,
yeah.
look at the Miro.
I mean, I would note that Kingston has ruined multiple wrestlers for me with behind the scenes knowledge. And I can't even I mean, it's up to him to say who's who, but there was one he told me failed an IQ test. And now every time I see this person, I'm just like it's all I can think of. And two, I would note that I got over this with Becky, but there's a period of time when her doing the worst a celebrity has ever done on Jeopardy.
really,
It's
yeah,
like-
me too.
All I
Me
could
too.
think of.
I don't want to read the book, but I want to read the book because I'm curious how the person who did the worst in the history of Jeopardy could write a book.
I mean, some people just don't test well, right? I mean, anybody ever blanked on a test though? I mean, it's a ton of pressure.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jeopardy is very hard. I've been on game shows and done okay, but then I tried out for Jeopardy and did very badly.
Mm.
So I will say being on Jeopardy is very hard, but still the worst ever on Celebrity Jeopardy, which is like easy Jeopardy. It's like dummy. It's like dummy Jeopardy.
I mean, we've all seen the SNL skit.
What
So
is
yeah,
light?
you know. Is this hot tea, hot or cold? Is what I always think of with Chris Kattan. But yeah, so yeah, sometimes it's just hard for people for me to get over. Like that's when I think the IWC is bad. Like I feel like I would like certain people more if I didn't know things that I really don't need to know about them. Which, by the way, may not even be true because everybody thinks they know everything, and all you have to do is like look at that Al Snow speech, which I think about all the time for comics too, where he's like, you know, familiarity breeds contempt, and people know enough to think they know how things work, but in reality have no idea.
I can
How
assure
things
you,
work.
the internet doesn't know shit, just from the shit that I know.
I mean, you're not the only well, you're not the only wrestling fan I've worked with in comics, and you two both say that each other doesn't know shit,
Sure.
as you're aware of, without naming names.
Well, no, but
So-
again, we talked about. I think, but I know Michael, you and I talked about this, and Steve, you and I talked about this. But like the way people think they understand comics is the same thing. Like nobody has any understanding of how comics actually works.
Or I've been making comics for 15 years and I don't understand how comics
Yeah.
work.
You know, and like working in TV and seeing how like the fact that anything gets made in TV at all because of how screwed up television is like constantly amazing to me. but then you see stuff like the way that, when I worked on Avatar, the rumor mill, like the way the rumor mill worked, we would see stuff about things like we hadn't even written yet. There would be like casting news about stuff, and we were like, this doesn't exist. Like, how would there be casting news? Like, we haven't written this yet. This character hasn't been conceived.
Well, it's
So
Fox
there's
News
no
style
possible way.
stuff, which is not me teeing up to make it political, but it's that style of delivery where they say someone says something and then they aggregate the thing that someone said as if it's news.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an issue with Scarlet Witch out this week, I will just say, and I woke up, and this led to me getting a lot of abuse, and which is not the point. Like finally figuring out that there's a way you can make it so only people you follow comment on your things on Instagram. I didn't know that until this but I woke up on Tuesday, and people were like, Steve Orlando gave this interview where he said the Scarlet Witch has always been secretly queer. My friends, let me tell you, I gave no interview. And it was happening in this week's Scarlet Witch. I gave no such interview. I said no such thing. And believe it or not, it also didn't happen in this week's issue of Scarlet Witch, because the entire thing was made up. But, one person said it, and then it was like, boom, 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 this is happening. So I feel like it's the same type of gimmick where like someone just says something, anyone has said something, and then they reference the fact that someone said it as the fact that it must be. It's like many people are saying.
Yeah.
But who are these people? Like if where are these tubes, as George Carlin once said, if a bunch of dentists and veterinarians are saying things about wrestling, like that's great, but they don't actually know. So it's just people who don't know saying the same thing again and again. But it's fascinating to me. Like I guess the difference is because I'm not a wrestler. I actually enjoy watching like the hounds go at each other when it comes to wrestling. And of course, I don't enjoy that with comics. I'm like, why can't you people just calm down?
Yeah.
Well, it's also the other difference, and like this is the sort of joy / curse of them doing what is essentially live TV, is that they can respond to it in a way that we in publishing and in regular television can't, right? Like there's no way to respond immediately to internet speculation, right? Like the way in what we do.
I mean, there is one way. It's
there is one way
emoji.
There's not a way. There's not a way in terms of making it continuity,
Okay.
right? So you can't immediately alter your plans and have it reflected on television.
Yeah.
The way that you can in wrestling. So like in wrestling, they adapt to what's happening, to the rumors and to the lies and to the news and the internet wrestling community stuff in such a fascinating way that ironically gives it way more credence. Because did
you see the article claiming the Trips is like scrolling the hashtag during Raw and SmackDown?
I read that. Yeah, that was fascinating.
And which I was like, all of our peers in comics are like, Steve, stop term searching yourself. Steve, don't look at the hashtags. And I'm like, bitch, like if Triple H is running $1 billion company and following the hashtag, like guess what? We all follow the hashtag. Like come on now.
I mean, Tony's famous for it too. I think it's a nice change of pace to listen to the audience. I mean, because for a long time they tried to force stuff, and they wanted to do the stuff they wanted to do and make the audience react how they wanted to react. So
I always tell the story, so my first proper work for hire gig was writing Vampirella. And so I was a huge Vampirella magazine fan. Like I loved, when I was a little kid, I read the magazine, and she had a supporting cast, right? And at some point, the supporting cast got deleted, and it just became Vampirella being a sexy bad girl was what the book became. But before that, it was kind of a cool soap opera book. So I started before I was going to write it, I started looking on the internet and reading message boards and really looking to see what do people want. And uniformly what people said they wanted, bring back classic Vampirella. We want the supporting cast. We want these characters back. And I was like, God damn, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm bringing back classic Vampirella. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, which is exactly what these people want. This vocal majority online definitely want this thing. And so I pitch it to, it was Harris at the time had the license. I pitch it to Harris Comics, And good old Bon Alamagno was like, absolutely, we love it. We hear this all the time that this is what people want. And so the first issue comes out and it has all the supporting characters brought back. And the reaction online, who the fuck are all these characters? We hate this. This is terrible.
Oh, geez.
Why isn't she
a
bending
sexy-
over more?
Yeah, why isn't she a sexy bad girl? What's going on? So I always think about how, like, I mean, do they really know what they want? Because they don't.
Well, I can beat you, Josh. I just did a 10-page Esperanto story, I just spoiled it. I just did a 10-page Vampirella story, and for whatever reason, I know that Forrest Ackerman was big into Esperanto.
Mm-hmm.
So every single character has an Esperanto name. And let me tell you, not a single person is going to get excited about that except me.
Look at WrestleMania 39 and how many people were mad that Cody didn't win. Can you look at WrestleMania 40 and all the stuff that led up to it, whatever, and call that a failure?
Well, it's good that The Rock, solved all that. For all of us.
Well, and with that, with our blessings for The Rock and his genius that has blessed us all, God bless us, everyone. Guys, I did not think we would go an hour and 45 minutes. I'm so grateful for all of the time. Do you guys want to do one final word about the pay-per-view? Like, what's your final word? Go ahead, Michael. What's your
Nigel McGuinness, baby?
Clutch, what do you got?
This might get real. I might get emotional for a second, but Elena Salcedo passed away this past week. And
devastating. So devastating.
She's been, partners with Dan Peterson, one of my oldest and best friends for a long time, and we've gone to so many AEW shows together. She's such a big fan, and it was a tough one to watch today, honestly. Just knowing that she's not there and Dan wasn't there to for us to all talk about it. So gonna miss her a ton.
Elena was it was so wonderful because I started at Top Cow. Right? They were one of the first places I ever worked, and she was so goddamn amazing to me. Like, she was such a sweetheart and so great. And she also would call me and tell me when Matt was doing stuff that I didn't know about, which was always really helpful.
Very good for that. Very good. For that.
She was very good. You know what, Matt? Just so you know, with your book, Matt did this today. And we're like, oh, good to know. Thanks. Yeah, she was wonderful. It's heartbreaking, really heartbreaking.
Well, I can't follow that, Sean.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Steve.
No, it's okay. Yes, I mean, I was also sad to see that. I can't say that I will say what is very telling, because this is a better theme to end on. I did not work at Top Cow. In fact, I've never worked at Top Cow. But since the first year I went to a convention and started tabling, which my first convention was 1997, but I think my first time I got into small press was like 2005, maybe 2007. The point is I did not matter back then. But one of the people who always treated me like I did, actually, in fact, was Elena, when I would come by the Top Cow booth and just ask about the business or things like that. So I cannot claim to have been super close, but I think it's telling that me, someone who did not really know her that well, she always took the time to, even when I was just aspiring to get in, to treat me like I belonged there. So I was also very sad to see that. I'm not trying to claim that thunder for people who are very close, but that's the truth. It's the dead truth. Like I was nobody in the business, but she always took the time to make me feel like I was.
Yeah, that was it was really shocking. Well, I'll end by saying I thought the show was fantastic today. I think it was I think it's probably the best in like a year of great pay-per-views for AEW overall. Like, I think this is probably the best one since, I don't know, Revolution, maybe? I think Revolution was the last one that was this good. Revolution? Yeah, Revolution. Yeah, it was really fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I really loved, I thought it was, like I said, I felt like this was a Goldilocks pay-per-view for me. Like, just the perfect length. It felt like everything in it was really firing. And guys, I am so incredibly grateful to get to hang out with you guys. Thank you so much for talking with me. And we really traveled all around the world. And got to do it all.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, thank you guys so much, and thank you to everybody who's listening and hanging out.